So I think the best place for me to start is when I was 17, I was working at Kroger Pharmacy, and I was not feeling very good at all. I had called my mom that morning and I wanted to call off work, and she said, just, honey, just try to push through, just try to make it. And so I was working in the pharmacy, and I just felt sicker than I had ever felt in my entire life. And so I excused myself and I went into the employee bathroom, and I ended up passing out on the bathroom floor. I don't know how long I laid there, but when I came to, I really felt like that was it. That was the end of my life. I knew in that moment that I was dying. And so I tried to call my mom and my dad both, and I left them voicemails telling them how much I loved them and where I was, because I knew that I was gonna die in that bathroom. And I prayed to God to somehow just get me where somebody could find me. And so he gave me the strength to crawl out into the Kroger aisle, and someone found me, called 911, and they rushed me to the hospital. I spent a week in the hospital. They did all kinds of tests and procedures and surgeries, and after about a week, they were ready to send me home. Basically, all of my stomach organs had been paralyzed by blood that had just been sitting stagnant in my stomach, and the Lord just completely healed and restored me. When they sent me home, the only thing that I had that was sticking with me from that whole ordeal was the fact that they said I would never be able to have babies. That was the only part of my organs that didn't respond, that never woke up. And so a 17-year-old girl, just knowing that that's what I wanted to be, was a mom, they had said, it's not gonna happen. And I went to many doctors, many surgeons through the course of the next few years, and that's what everybody's story was. Unfortunately, it's not gonna happen. So we assumed that we would adopt, and that was fine if that was God's will. But 3 months into being married to my husband, we found out that we were pregnant. We were just ecstatic, over the moon. We had a perfectly healthy pregnancy and delivery, and just the most amazing little boy that we could have been blessed with. And so if you fast forward, it was Memorial Day weekend. Bentley Thomas was almost 2 years old, about a week shy of turning 2, and we'd had a wonderful Memorial Day. We'd been out swimming with him and just having an amazing time. So we put him to sleep that night, and it was the middle of the night, and we had heard just the awfulest noise that I had ever heard in my whole life, and it woke me and my husband both up from bed, and I said, I'm gonna go check on Bentley. And so I go into his room across the hall, and he was having a seizure. His eyes rolled back into his head, his arms and legs just like stretched out, and his whole bed was shaking with this seizure. And so I yell into my husband, I say, you have to call 911, you have to call 911, Bentley's having a seizure. And so I watched my baby for minutes seizing, and when he stopped seizing, I picked him up in my arms and I held him, and I looked down at his eyes and his face, and I'm expecting him to kind of come to, and it wasn't. It was like the complete opposite of coming to. His lips turned blue, and his face turned just the most awful shade of gray that I had ever seen in my entire life. And I just knew in that moment that this promise that God had given us, this miracle baby, that he was being taken from us, because he wasn't breathing, his chest wasn't rising, I will never forget just the way he looked in that moment, because it looked like death. My husband was outside because the paramedics couldn't find us. They were across town at an apartment complex and nowhere close to our house. And so he's trying to give them directions to where we are. And I'm holding our lifeless baby, this precious miracle from God, in my arms. And I wish that I could tell you in that moment that, I got down on my knees and I prayed this like elaborate prayer to God, but that is not what I did. I did the only thing that I knew to do, and the only word that I could form was Jesus. And so over and over and over, I just yelled, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And that's all that I had the power to say in that moment. And nothing changed. And I said, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. and nothing changed except he turned grayer and darker and just more limp. And I said, Jesus, Jesus. And then his arms kind of fell to his side and his whole body was just limp in my arms. And I yelled out of the window to my husband, who's still in the middle of the street, and I said, tell them there's no sense in even coming because he's dead now. Just tell them they don't have to come because our baby's gone. And then I would go back to Jesus, 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 because it's all that I could say in that moment. And I questioned God, like, why would you give us this miracle that everyone said, you know, it's impossible for you to conceive, for you to bear a child, and you blessed us with this, and now you're taking him and he's not even 2. And in that moment I just could not understand why God would take our baby. And I had flashes through my mind of us at a funeral and him in a casket, and we really just knew that he was gone. And so the paramedics finally get to our house and they come running up the stairs with Andy, and I still have Bentley in my arms, and there's just two paramedics that come into our house, and they bring nothing with them, and we, you know, in that moment you would assume that they'd have like a gurney and like an AED, something to save my baby's life, but they came in with nothing, and they took Bentley from our arms, and before they even had a chance to like start working on him or to, you know, check his vitals or anything, this baby that had been laying lifeless in my arms at this point for 10 minutes, plus the time that he was seizing before that, which was probably close to 5, and they took Bentley from my arms. And instantly when he left my arms and entered theirs, he took just the biggest gasp of air, and then he started reaching for us, and he said, Mama, Mama, and he knew who I was, and he knew who his daddy was, and before anybody had ever touched him, he knew, and his, you know, abilities to think and to speak, they all just came back to him, and he was breathing on his own, and they did nothing. And so we know that it was the power of God, that, you know, the enemy that day tried to come in and take this miracle that God had given us from our lives, and he tried to stop what God had ordained in that moment, and all we had to do was call on the name of Jesus. That is the only thing that we had to do, and he restored our baby back to us from, you know, 15 minutes of his life being gone, 15 minutes of not breathing, 15 minutes of him just laying there limp and lifeless and gray, and then in a moment, not even just a second, he was brought back to life, and not just life, but life abundantly. The power of God in that moment became just so real to me. You know, I had heard God do miracles for other people, and I had heard, you know, all of the Bible stories about all of the amazing things that he's capable of, and I believed that. I knew that he was able, and I knew that he was good, and that he is faithful. But in that moment, he became so real to me and my family, because we literally watched him raise our baby from the dead. We watched him take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it around for our good. And we have, you know, instilled this testimony into our son, who is now just turned 12. And he, you know, he knows, and he gives this testimony now. And it has, you know, been a constant in our lives as just one of the many ways that we've been able to share with people that we know that God is who he says that he is, and that even greater, like, he is able to do everything that he says that he's able to do. And he is faithful even in the midst of the storms, and he is true to his word and to his promises. And I am just so thankful and blessed that we serve a God who is able.